Therapy Jeff, as you guys know, made a video last week or the last week and a half now probably, in which he was canceled and he made an apology video. But fun fact, it's not on his TikTok. His TikTok with 3 million followers, not on his TikTok. Why wouldn't it be? This is the most recent video on his TikTok.
You don't know what you want for dinner? And
Jeff, that's not the video I want to see. Where out of all the places would Jeff have posted this apology for basically one, being extra explicit about how he likes his genitals played with, inappropriate, thanks to a Shan Budrum thread post, very inappropriate, okay? Also, I have an issue with that, and we will get into some Shan stuff at the end of the stream today, but that's for something later. Jeff decided to post his apology on Instagram. What? Why in the world would you post it on Instagram when you know for a fact a bunch of this discourse was happening on TikTok? That feels like a lack of accountability to me. So let's watch the apology and see what he says and see if it's any good. First, let me move this over so you can get a better picture of Jeff. Okay. Now, Jeff primarily was also getting canceled, in case you guys didn't see my video on this already, because while we were going over the 62 million hits on motherless.com about men recording over 22,000 videos of them drug, raping, and assaulting their loved ones, Jeff decided in that same week to talk about a hotline for men who might be thinking about assaulting their partners without even recognizing that that hotline exists. You can talk to people. But 3, he centered the pain on the perpetrators instead of the victims, which a lot of men that week did. A lot of men that week decided to focus all of the attention on the men, on the 62 number, whatever else. So, okay, that's the context. Here we go.
I want to talk about my post on Threads earlier this week asking where men could call if they were worried they might sexually assault their partner. I posted that the same week the CNN investigation came out about the global network of men who drug and rape their wives. To anyone who read my post and felt hurt or unseen by it, I hear that, and you're right to be angry. Instead of centering survivors, I centered the internal experience of the men who might do the harming. I applied a framework that shifted attention toward the man rather than grounding it in the impact on the woman he might hurt. Men do this. I did this here. I was wrong, and I'm very sorry. I also got the clinical substance wrong, and I want to be specific about that part. My framing treated sexual assault like an intrusive thoughts problem. The research shows that it's driven by entitlement and deliberate choices rather than thoughts someone is trying to resist. I misapplied an OCD treatment framework to a completely different issue, and I was out of my scope. While it's my responsibility, I didn't catch this on my own. Commenters and other creators took the time and effort to educate me. That labor mostly came from women and from survivors. I'm really grateful you shared that with me. I read what you wrote, and I'm still learning from it. I also want to name that for many of you, I've been a therapist you trusted. The work I do centers on creating safe spaces, whether that's in an office or online. That's not something I take lightly. I crossed a line in how sexually explicit I was in a recent post. While that alone was inappropriate, I also didn't take into account how hurtful this was given everything that's going on. I reinforced dynamics that harm people and make them feel unsafe. It was a gap in judgment. It was not appropriate. I'm really sorry. I take seriously the fact that you spoke up when I got this wrong. I am not going to shy away from that. It's how I do better. I want to talk about...
So someone says right here, this video is not on TikTok. Like, this video is not on TikTok. Okay, a couple of things I want to talk about. Things I appreciate before I get critical. I appreciate that his tone was serious and grounded, because what frustrated me with his initial post was actually his like, hey, like, are you assault? Like, it was like, whoa. It was like very like too pippy. I know his content is pippy, but it was like pippy and talking about very serious problems. So I didn't like that. I like that he is grounded in this and his tone is better and respectful. I would have actually preferred a little bit more commentary about the post explaining his how he likes his genitals played with. I probably would have liked something there about I don't know, like maybe one or two more sentences on the detail of that post, because I just can't even process the lack of judgment in that moment of like how he even thought to do it or why he thought to post it, or honestly, there's so much there I would have liked. The OCD comment I think is interesting, and I struggled because even people in my audience who are OCD or have OCD or diagnosed OCD, they that was their initial guess. They're like, I bet he's coming from an OCD perspective. Here's the problem with OCD and the reality of mental health that people aren't ready to hear about. They're not ready to hear about OCD people looping on fears of being a pedophile or being a rapist. They're not here to hear that. It's very hard to explain to a society that doesn't even consider like cheating predatory behavior, right? The thought that somebody's having the thought of being a pedophile as a fear could mean that they're not one. So I think when mental health professionals get up on the internet and talk about very serious things, they should explain it from a very medical perspective and say, like, you can be an absolutely innocent non-pedophile and have looping thoughts on being a pedophile. And that's because OCD is as a suffering, you suffer, right? And so instead of empathizing with the victims of a suffering ailment, it focused about active rapists who were not victims of OCD thinking. And so that's what muddles the water. That's why people are confused. That's why this recent case with Tanner and Athena, God, rest the soul of Athena, when people say, oh, Tanner's autistic, he's ADHD, he's depressed. What does that have to do with the fact that he murdered Athena? None of that has anything directly to do with the fact that he did what he did. And people like me who are diagnosed autistic, who are most likely ADHD and who have suffered from depression, sit there and go, hey, what does this have to do with us? Don't say it that way. And this is the problem with humanity, is they're not willing to acknowledge from a database perspective the nuances of being a biological animal presence on the planet. And so we are not having a deep enough relationship with our biological experience to intervene when necessary, especially when people are young. And so we know with Tanner's mother, she had even said to him, did you do anything weird to that little girl? I know how you get, right? So we know in our own families. I also think this wraps into accountability, because I was thinking about this out loud this weekend. The dilemma I was thinking about why people protect pedophiles or murderers or rapists. And I realized a big part of it, at least from my experience, is people don't like prison systems, and I don't either. But when we do prison systems, right, it's a punishment system. And nobody wants to imagine that their loved ones are going to go into a box in which they will be harassed, raped, beaten, stabbed. And so they're like, I'm not going to turn in my family member. And so instead of turning in, because we don't have a rehabilitation process, and rehabilitation doesn't mean they'll get let out, by the way. I think if we want to rehabilitate rapists, it would be to have them contend with what they did, not so they could get out of the facility, but so they could live in the facility in a way that like doesn't mean torturing them. I think the problem is because we live in America. We want to punish people. We want to torture people for their wrongdoings, right? But then we don't want to openly say our loved one is a XYZ, insert here. And so it ends up creating a cycle of just so much toxicity that nobody actually knows how to help anybody, right? Not to mention all of our, all of these countries where men say, oh, men are going to protect you. Men would murder against pedophiles. And yet you're getting married to 16-year-olds. Russell Brand, who sits there and says, like, I'm not a pedophile. Yes, did I sleep with a 16-year-old when I was 30? But I'm not a pedophile, right? Like, this disconnect is why we have so many problems, is that we should be asking, why are 30-year-olds even talking to teenagers? Like, why are you even interacting with them in any capacity that could lead to this behavior, right? So there's so much here. So people are saying, well, why would I turn Russell Brand in? He's not a rapist. He had consensual sex with a 16-year-old. It was legal. But in my mind, how could that not be rape? In my mind, how could that not be coercion? In my mind, how could a 30-year-old person? And so the reason I would say that I would want to turn in, I would want to have these men in facilities, is not to say that these men need to be punished. It's to say that these men cannot be trusted around other people, because even in an interview, he's willing to say with no guilt or shame, Jerry Seinfeld used to pick his high school girlfriend up from high school when she got out. In his 30s, he had a 17-year-old girlfriend in high school. He would pick her up from school. What are we talking about? Like, what are we talking about? And that's the problem. The problem is the normalization. The problem is well, not me though. Yeah, but why are you even talking to high school girls? I don't get it. And so again, when we're having these conversations, I think this is why Jeff's content rings so just aggravating for people because it was like, bro, aren't you supposed to be one of the good ones? Now, this coincides with what I want to talk about today as a whole about, being decentering men and patriarchy and understanding that, like, can there be good men? Listen, I believe in gender deconstruction, like abolish gender. Like, gender is a performance and it's an expression of self. And yes, people can be a gender. And yes, you can identify with a gender. And yes, you can identify with a sex or identify yourself through a data lens of sex. And though, I don't like the idea that baby boys are hopeless. Like, people giving birth to what we call a boy is unable to be loving, unable to be cared for, unable to be dignified. Like, no, that can't be the answer. The answer cannot be that children are evil by simply being born. So then we have to really contend with, why do children grow up to be these people? And it is heavily our lack of deeper relationship with our biological experience. Because just because it's biological doesn't mean it's predetermined, even though it's predetermined because it's biological. These two things have to be, two contradictory truths have to be, they are both true. So you have to understand the differences. And this is why I say, I personally pay attention to what I post on the internet, especially now, because the internet is not a safe space. It's actually a very dangerous space. And so you need to be careful for your client's sake, for people suffering from really difficult mental struggles. I would be very careful in this world where it is so mob focused, sharing my vulnerabilities with an internet that is willing to find your home. So I understand the internet wants to empower people and bring awareness to things, but we need to be very careful, right, with the way we have these conversations. I did see a TikTok going viral on my side of the internet as well from a Black woman who said, why are white women obsessed with rehabilitating pedophiles? I don't know what these white women you're talking about are, but I will say, when I say it, what I mean to say is everyone deserves rehabilitation. It doesn't mean you're going to have your old life back. So even if you're imprisoned for the rest of your life, that is a form of rehabilitation. So I don't know what she might be referencing. Maybe there's, definitely a whole group of women that want to see their sons out of prison, whatever. I'm saying, even if they're still in the facility forever, they deserve to be treated with dignity. So the workers there are also dignified, because we have to remember the workers that work there should also be dignified enough not to say, oh, honey, how was work today? Oh, I beat up an inmate today. Oh, honey, how was work today? Oh, I raped an inmate today. This is not justification. This is not good. This is not justice. This is not, health. So again, all of us are the reason the world is the way that it is. And we must all have a deeper relationship with our biological experience. We must all challenge ourselves to have a better relationship with self. Okay. So, to therapy, Jeff, nice try. I don't accept it. One, I'm never going to watch him again. I'm never going to show him my videos again unless it's drama related or / news related or / something like that. Like, I'm never going to utilize Jeff as like a source, but I will say that it tells me that he's not genuine. The fact that he posted this on Instagram and not TikTok. The only men I know who do this is because they're trying to get their main audience not aware of what's happening. He has 1 million followers on Instagram, but he has 3 million followers on TikTok. So that tells me he's avoiding responsibility because he doesn't want everyone to see it. Because I would never have seen it if someone didn't tell me it was on Instagram. Never. Why would I look up Therapy Jeff on Instagram? Guys, I do not look people up on Instagram ever. And Instagram's algorithm doesn't show me things like Therapy Jeff. I only see it on TikTok. So yeah, apology not accepted, but good luck with your life, I guess.